Welcome back to Cheche, the program where opinion counts. Today's guests are the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Ambassador Martin Kimani, and the chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in the National Assembly, Ndungu Givenji. We're talking about the KDF attack in Somalia. We're reflecting on that. And before the break, we'd come into the issue of strengthening AMISOM's mandate. But the debate during the break was even more interesting because, and it's captured in a message from this viewer. Cheche, Ndungu Givenji's claim that they will let the military look into possible lapses before them is appalling. The attack on KDF looks like it exploited loopholes. That means anybody at any level might have erred by commission or omission. What happens if it's error by commanders who at the same time are usually investigators or court-martial officers? Think about this. How did the VBIEBs get driven into a camp without being hit from afar? How come Somalia, this camp, was poorly armed? And they were trained by Kenya? Okay, this is not making any sense. Is there a possibility of charcoal deals, sugar or more, the corruption?
Yeah, let me say this, you know, and people need to appreciate, this is not the first time a VBID attack has happened on an AMISOM camp. This is the third time.
But should we have been more careful? Because you're talking about the attacks on Burundi and Uganda.
Attack on Burundi camp in 2014, Uganda camp previously, last year. And the increasing tactic of the use of VBIDs in attacking encamped positions of AMISOM is a new tactic by Al-Shabaab and used to great effect. The question is this, what assets can be deployed to prevent that type of attack? And the answer is, of course, air surveillance and air assets.
And this
is the strengthening of the mandate of AMISOM that I am saying. We do not have the correct positioning or deployment in terms of assets for the AMISOM mission to protect against certain types of
okay, so that's one issue. Training, and David, you brought this up during the break. We hear, and you corrected me, that some of the people who were deployed at Al-Ade were freshly deployed, and so might not have been prepared.
No, I think people's appreciation of what the military is needs to grow, and maybe the military being the military, and not only in Kenya but all around the world, has some air of esotericity around it, a bit of a mystique, but that's just the nature of military. But anybody who has an insight and can appreciate either people in the military or around the military appreciate that a soldier once trained, a soldier who graduates and does the passing out in the passing out parade and takes the oath of allegiance in the military to his commander-in-chief and his country, is ready to be deployed in any station in any part of the country or outside of the country. So rotation, as it happens, you have troops who are taken from the barracks and taken to bases around the country, whether they be in Mandera, in Wajir, at Kahawa, in Mombasa, at Mutongwe, wherever it is, or even outside stations like in southern Somalia, southern Sudan, in southern Somalia, maybe even to be taken as far afield as West Africa and so on. So once you're in the military, that is you're part of the command chain, and you take orders from your commanders and ultimately from the commander-in-chief. That is what militaries do around the world. It is nothing new, it is nothing odd, it is nothing strange.
Well, the thing is that a lot of speculation is coming out. Obviously, the situation has triggered a lot of thoughts, reflections. Everybody's trying to find out what happened, and the information is flowing, and there are different accounts of what happened. First of all, I think that as chairman of the parliamentary committee, I would not be expecting him to be in full defense of the KDF in terms of what might have happened, except of course to stand with KDF as a Kenyan, as a government, that we must stand with our soldiers. But ultimately, your committee will of course be looking at what exactly went wrong, as with every other mission, and that is your oversight role. So the things which are coming forth, I think, should be food for thought for you to take back, because I think there's quite a lot about whether the freshly deployed troops in the rotation arrangement had been prepped whether there was sufficient precaution or facilitation that they had, and all these things, and about whether they actually followed the protocol.
Let me speak to this issue.
Do come in, Ambassador.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we need to have a very clear understanding not to be drawn into Al-Shabaab's logic. What Al-Shabaab wants to do is not to gain a military advantage, because the Kenya Defense Forces and AMISOM have already taken their military advantage from them. When we went in 2011, they occupied Kismayu, they occupied large parts of Somalia, and we changed the logic. We changed the logic, and today what was a military that had a very conventional sense has become a gang on the run. Still able to inflict damage, but a gang on the run. So this attack on Elade, our base, and the AMISOM base, its reason is not to gain a military advantage, because we will take back that area. What it is an attempt to cast doubt on the quality of the forces that have routed them for the last 4 years. Absolutely. That same KDF that took Kismayu from the air, from the sea, and from land, something that had been said by military experts was something no one was willing to be able to do. This was the same military that was able to take on the people who a superpower wounded a superpower and caused them to be able to believe they could rule Somalia. So this same KDF is the one that was attacked. So let us not go so deep into speculation. The facts will emerge. Right now, the people who are most interested in what happened, how we can improve, how we can strengthen ourselves, is the leadership of KDF and the leadership of this country, the commander-in-chiefs specifically. These are very important. So the focus now is rescue, search and rescue, and pay back these people for what they've done. The answers that we need in terms of strengthening our operational capabilities will emerge, and I'm telling you, they will be incorporated into how KDF does business, because that is how we came to be able to do what we've done.
Ambassador, part of your mandate is countering radicalization. Here's a message from Eric in Bungoma. Cheche, there are claims that before the attack was ambushed by the terrorists, the neighboring civilians had been evacuated and or moved. If these claims are true, that means the Somali population is turning hostile and not willing to share information with our military intelligence. This attack is a pointer for our forces to redefine their approach to wiping out the enemy in a span of time. And so there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect that locally what tends to happen here is that the feeling against communities associated or seem to be associated with terrorists spikes, whether it's Muslims, whether it's ethnic Somalis.
Yes. Well, the entire logic of a terrorist campaign is to gain control over civilian populations and to use terror and to divide, so that they attempt to give the Somali people an impression that Kenya and AMISOM are not legitimately there. But if you look at what Al-Shabaab has done to the Somali people in terms of killing them and torturing them, this is the same group that was as petty as to refuse people to watch football. They murder, they rape. So the people of Somalia themselves are people who are living under this oppression. Now, is there radicalization amongst that local population? Is there radicalization here in Kenya? The answer is yes. And in fact, I believe that even as we talk about Elade, we need to start thinking more about our home front, because there are 40 million plus Kenyans, and we're in a position to say we are going to drive up our own alertness about Al-Shabaab and radicalization here at home. And that is the best thing we can do in terms of standing with KDF. Not just to say we stand with KDF, but to say we are going to make sure that Al-Shabaab has no room to operate in Kenya. And like I like saying, if you own some rooms that you're renting, if some new character comes to your village or to your neighborhood, you don't know who they are, they're being secretive. Speak out, because that is how we need to stand. To me, standing with KDF does not mean saying that statement. It means saying where I live, where I work, I will not allow these people to operate.
I still think we need an approach of proper communication, Ambassador Kimani. Not by going on to this issue of the attack, but the information of what our military is doing in Somalia. You know, when this campaign started in 2011, I knew Somalia like it's my village. I knew where Afmado is. I knew where Gedo was. All that. We shouldn't lose that. And why we are losing, and I agree with you, to Al-Shabaab is because first, our military is professional. There are things we cannot go saying. We cannot be telling people every day that we have killed 300 of them. We have killed 500, because they will start saying that we are killing civilians. Whereas we know for sure that these Al-Shabaab are not uniformed fellas. You know, they are not uniformed. You cannot tell Al-Shabaab from the way they are dressing. They are in the civilians. I think for now, and I still think as a Kenyan, it's not about our forces losing their lives in Somalia. It's about how we are pursuing those guys and what we are doing to secure our country and even to secure Somalia for the sake of Kenya.
You know, I think militarily, Kenya has done so many things right. From the time we entered Somalia, Operation Linda Inchi, Operation Sledgehammer, liberation of Kismayu, and you know, liberating southern Somalia and Jubaland. Militarily, I think we have done all the right things. Politically, however, this is where we need to ramp up our game. What is Kenya's strategic interest? What is Kenya's strategic interest? Kenya's strategic interest should be in having a neighbor who is peaceful, who is prosperous, who we can trade and do business with. A neighbor who cooperates and has a same philosophy of development as other neighborhoods that, you know, that we have in the East African community. So it begs the question that Kenya politically has done everything that it can for the last 25 years, from the time Kalonzo Musyoka was spending months and months trying to get the transitional federal government together, from the time they held their first parliament here in Nairobi, to relocation to Mogadishu, to supporting the government in Mogadishu, and so on and so forth. All these things we have done consistently. And then at the end of the day, to do a military campaign to liberate the country from Al-Shabaab, and then in the very next breath, what happens? The government, which we have spent so much effort, time and money to support and even shed blood for, then goes and claims our territory, our territorial border, our sea front, and makes us sea locked. I mean, then we are wondering what happened. I thought we were together, we were working towards a common goal, and then you do this singular act of hostility, of claiming Kenya's territorial waters. I mean, that in any other country would be an act of war. So politically, now the question needs to be asked: are we together or are we not?
Then what we are saying, Mheshimiwa, and I'm glad you have brought that one out. Politically, you need you plus other politicians support the President of the Republic, because one, he is the President and also the Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces.
Indeed.
So there are times when you talk as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and there are times when you speak as the President of the Republic. But again, he cannot stoop that low. So politicians, rather than discussing the things that we see you discussing on television that are not necessary to Kenyans, why don't you now go and sell to Kenya so that they can understand? You can mobilize Kenyans together. If Museveni says that he's going to extend the border to Nakuru, we don't have to wait for President Uhuru Kenyatta to say we are going to fight him. It is the politicians who are going to say we are not going to let it. We are ready to shed blood for the sake of our country, and this is what we are supposed to do again, mobilizing Kenyans against Al-Shabaab politically.
This political reorientation is overdue. We are now going to start that rallying call. Nobody, and President Jomo Kenyatta at Independence said this very clearly, not 1 inch, period. Yeah. So whether it's an inch of land or sea, that will never be ceded. and it will be done over the dead bodies of Kenyans. We will not cede our republic to any other country at all.
So, of course, we're reflecting on the KDF attack, and so far what we've talked about is strengthening the mandate of the AMISOM mission out in Somalia. You say that you're going to lead that effort in Parliament, where you brought out communication, and now we're talking about political orientation. And David, I noticed what seemed like skepticism on your face as Waweri was speaking. Help us understand what it was that you were thinking.
No, not really. Not really.
Yes.
I think there is no doubt that this country is united when we come under such, attack has happened in Somalia. I have not had anybody who has a different view about the fact that our soldiers and this country is under attack. There could be differences of opinion about whether we need to continue being in Somalia, whether our mission has been served, whether our troops need to come back. Except that now there are certain things you cannot say at certain times, because now then, as Ambassador Kimani has said, it seems to be playing into the logic of the enemy, that we have terrified them so much they want to withdraw. But remember, these conversations have been on for a while. Prior to this attack, there were conversations about whether KDF needs to continue being there, or whether under AMISOM or on our own rights in defense of our territory or borders, and how we should go forward doing it. I guess these matters need to be explored, even in these circumstances.
Ambassador.
If I may, I think, David, you're right. Differences of opinion are fine. We are Kenyans, and Kenyans have different opinions, and I actually welcome debate on these issues. And I think what you said that is so important is that ultimately we're united in knowing that those are our forces and they're trying to defend us. I want to speak to this issue of what is the strategic interest. Strategy is no big secret. It's not a secret at all. Our strategy as Kenya in terms of security is unchanged over 70 years. To protect our territorial integrity and to sustain our constitutional model and our way of life. And that way of life is multi-religious, it's democratic, it's pluralistic. When it's not been as democratic as we've wanted, we have fought for democracy. So our strategic interest is in maintaining and sustaining our way of life as Kenyans. And that interest is under attack, which is why, whether in Somalia or elsewhere, Kenya cannot ever rest as long as our right to sit here and debate together freely, to have differences of opinion, to be able to express what we think. That's what we're fighting for. And I think it's going to cost us. It has already cost us. And fighting for our freedom, since the time we're fighting the colonial regime to today, has been very costly to Kenyan lives. And we're going to continue that fight because we've decided this is how we want to live as free people.
Our viewers are capturing some of that and are asking the same question. We salute our soldiers in Somalia. It's sad they lost their lives on the base and not in operations. Al-Shabaab are ex-soldiers, so change tack. That's Patrick in Nakuru. Cheche, since 1963, Somalis have been against Kenyans. We must accept that our neighbor is our enemy. Move out and secure our borders. That came from Mutevia. Then there's this. We achieved our goal long time ago when our soldiers captured Kismayu and Raska Kamboni and other towns. Why go to the Upper Ghetto region? We mourn because we heed advice.
Before Waweri jumps in, let me just say one thing very quickly.
And very quickly, as you address that, what is our business in Somalia? Is it fear, honor, or interest?
So anyway, of course it's interest. Where Kenya has a strategic interest in stabilizing Somalia and protecting our citizens. But I was going to say this, that we've been I think you just made me lose my train of thought.
I'm so sorry. No, you were responding.
As you do, Mheshimiwa, I think I want to make a comment on the patriotism of Kenyans. This is a time when we don't need to speak as journalists, as military people, as MPs, and we speak as Kenyans. And say, what is better? When we are pursuing Al-Shabaab in their own land, or when they are pursuing us here at home? I would rather KDF remains in Somalia to pursue them. They have no way of escape, because they will pursue in the borders of Ethiopia, They will be pursued in the borders, other borders, but we cannot allow them to come and pursue us in our own land. This has happened before, and Kenyans must realize this, that it is not Kenya that started the war in Somalia, but it is them who brought the war to us. Absolutely. By attacking our own visitors. Indeed. You cannot allow a visitor who is in your house, I come and attack that visitor. I'll say no. Even if you have differences with this visitor, I would rather you wait until he leaves my house. You can go and attack him in his or her house. But these guys brought it to us by killing tourism in Mombasa, which the economy has been affected. I think Kenyans, as a media and as individuals, we must bring Kenyans together and tell them we have no option. They are the ones who provoked us. We are going to pursue them, and that's why KDF is there. If it does not matter how many liters of blood will be shed in Somalia, so long until we secure, and that's why whether old or young, our servicemen are in Somalia. We shouldn't be dampened by what they have done. After all, they have killed us inside here in Syria.
But quite a few of our viewers, just a minute, quite a few of our viewers understand that. Yes. But they question, as Mumbo in Nairobi does, and several others are asking the same question. Every war has its casualties, and the soldiers who went to Somalia knew what to expect. However, I feel that there are underlying issues which led to the attack of a well-guarded AMISOM base occupied by KDF soldiers. Could it be related to undercutting in deals involving sugar and charcoal? Could it have manifested from trade differences among commanders? And there's several people asking those sorts of things.
Considering what, I've not been to Somalia, Odwak, and I want to comment as a Kenyan and say, first of all, do our servicemen have time for sugar? Even here in Kenya, they don't. Or if you go for sugar in Somalia, it is not those individual young men young men and women who are fighting for us there. So thinking about sugar is, I think, distracting and the minds of Kenyans. And we must remain focused on one issue.
Okay, you made the point.
The narrative of sugar and charcoal is an Al-Shabaab propaganda narrative, so that one we should discount. But the point I was going to make, and when I lost my train of thought, I think Wawedo found it, because he made my point for me. But I just wanted to say, similar to what you're saying, Kenyans have been crying, saying, why are we being attacked in our borders? How does Al-Shabaab have access to come and kill us in Kenya? And you've seen since, if you've seen since the security laws and since the revamping of the security framework architecture in Kenya, the space for them to operate in this country has been diminished. The last time we had an attack was Baure, which was an attack on a military target. So what we were saying is that yes, now Al-Shabaab is engaging the correct targets. You engage the military because you are a military fighting force. You engage the military. You don't attack soft target civilians because you are cowards. So I think they now started to pick up that line and said, okay, we don't want to be seen as cowards. Let's attack legitimate military targets, which is what we do in war. In war, the military fights the military. So the fact that they are now trying to attack military targets is now trying to legitimize themselves as a legitimate fighting force, which they had lost. Okay, so now we are saying KDF is now defending the Kenyan population. We are now secure. We're not being attacked. They're taking losses, but this is what happens in a war situation. So we want to help them now further and say whatever weaknesses that are allowing you to be attacked, we want to strengthen either through AMISOM or through direct national policies and make them stronger and more competent, and give them the teeth, the tools and the assets to go into Somalia and finish Al-Shabaab once and for all.
Let's explore that when we come back from the break. In the meantime, here are the numbers for you. The KDF helplines: Defense Headquarters 0792-780-862, and they should be on your screens as well. Defense Memorial Hospital 0792-780-863, Gilgil 0792-780-864, and Eldoret 0792-780-865. We'll be back after this break.